This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. Today, I'm happy to share with you all Marilyn Raichle. She has worked as a producer at the Bathhouse Theater in Seattle and was a theater communications fellow at the Guthrie in Minneapolis. She founded the Seattle International Children's Festival, which is now the largest such festival in the U.S. She has a master's in public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and I wanted to talk to her today about children's theater and how it benefits kids and how she draws out the goodness from those people in that setting. And welcome, Marilyn.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, my son was an actor in Chicago and New York City for about 5 years and worked with children's theater on a couple of occasions. He worked there for at least one summer, and he was talking about the difference between younger kids and older kids, and I wondered if you had noticed that. He said it was a lot easier to get younger kids to be funny and spontaneous, and then around middle school they kind of draw in and they get so self-conscious. Have you noticed that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing about little kids, you can see them all hand in hand going into the theater and then coming out with just images of wonder on their faces. And they're always just sort of blown away. I mean, I presented, theater from all over the world. And this was for so many kids, their first experience with theater that was for them. But then as you got older, that you select the performances that speak to something that they can think about, and that there were always question and answer periods so that they could actually explore more about what they experienced. But yeah, it's a completely different thing because with little kids, it's just like, what? And with older kids, it's like, It's like, can we talk, but then it was always such an explosion of goodwill, such an explosion of understanding things, such an explosion of happiness to be able to experience something that was for them. I mean, there were performances that we had from Sweden that were extraordinary. To this day, I think that's some of the best theater I've ever seen. And it was all about little animals, running around the stage, and they had names for them, but it spoke to them. I mean, and that's the thing about children's theater. It's the same principles of using all of these, techniques, but it speaks to them. It's tailored for them to create a message for them to experience that can live forever. Which I love about children's theater.
Yeah, it's so important for them. I've never met anyone who said, being in a play, I can't remember if I ever did that as a child. It imprints on them. It is so memorable. Even if they played, the cow in the background in the field, they remember exactly the whole experience, and it really is so formative and important, I think. I took theater at the Dallas Theater Center in Dallas, and they're a repertory theater, so they have the same cast members there for years at a time. And so I got to know them as people, and they got to know me by name. And one of my classmates even would, stay with them on holidays and stuff when her family traveled because she was just so into theater and she grew up to become a professional actress. And it was amazing to get to know these people personally and see their joy of acting and how they embraced so many different kinds of parts. And it was really good for me to see adults playing like that because you call it playing,
Oh,
playing a
right, of
role.
course.
It is a play that you
Yeah.
and most adults lose their sense of play and lose a lot of the creativity therewith. So that was a neat experience for me. Um, I read,
That's a wonderful comment, though, that
mhm,
kids get to see adults at play,
yeah,
which they don't get to see that often,
yeah,
uh, which is really, I think, a revelation for them. Is that I didn't know they could play.
right, right. Um, and I was in raising my kids. I don't know if you have kids, but I found it very important to let them be involved in plays and theater. And I was very influenced by a book by Robert Schulman called Bringing Up a Moral Child. Did you ever come
Mm,
across that?
mm-mm.
Um, and he said that there was a study done of three groups of kids. I think they were young teenagers. And one was a control group, and nothing different was done. They were just in their school and activities. And then another one, they made videos like documentaries and nature things or something like that. The third group did role playing. And I don't remember if they made videos of it, but they engaged in role playing. And the third group was the only one that showed improved interpersonal skills, fewer contacts with law enforcement later, um, more empathy. And I really was impressed with the fact that role playing and taking on other personas can give us understanding that even helps us be better citizens, and be better
Yeah.
family members and friends.
Well, and that we hear so much about the ability for, I mean, the military bringing in so many people from so many different parts of the country. And it's similar because with role playing, you get to hear and speak and understand what other people are going through.
Mhm.
It gives you that empathy that helps you become a better, more understanding person. And it's true, it does help you as you become older, is that you had that experience with other points of view,
Absolutely.
and that's really important, and also in a joyful way.
Mhm. Yeah. Because you're
Yeah, it's
making
always
something
coming back to that
positive
joy.
with it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was looking at the uh, experiences of some kids that did theater that were interviewed. This was at stageagent.com. I don't know if you've ever heard that. I'm not sure
Yeah.
what it is, but they interviewed kids who were in theater. These were high school age kids. And one of them said, the fourth wall, it protects you from everything.
Oh.
Could you explain to
Oh.
my audience that may
Well,
not know what
well,
the
so
fourth wall is, what that child was saying?
well, the fourth wall, when you're on stage, you are in a world and you don't connect with the audience, as you're not participating with them. They are absorbing what you are doing, but it's separate. So that if you were having a conversation with them, they would call that, I'm having an aside with the audience, but that's not what you're doing. Um, but the fourth wall protects them. Is that interesting? So it protects them for what they are doing on the stage, or is it protecting them as human beings? When that kid said that, I'm curious to know more about what they were thinking, because it does protect you.
Yeah. I think for me, for being in plays, it protected me in that I had this deniability about trying out different roles. I could be another person for a while and then step out of it and not have to, be responsible for the whole life of someone else. I was just
Right.
in and out, and I could try it on. I could try on a different way of seeing and living
Mhm.
and then take it off and maybe adopt more of that person's viewpoint, or maybe never again.
It's interesting, and I have to sort of say that I was always the producer of these things, so I've never been an actor. It always terrified me
Really?
being an actor. Oh yeah, I started out young, thinking I would become an actor, and it just terrified me. And I switched when I started out first taking acting classes, and it terrified me. So I switched to debate because in our family, arguing was easier and safer because we could always win. But in acting, it was something that I always wanted to be able to do, but it scared me too much.
Wow.
And yeah, and so then I switched to producing, which enabled me to experience theater in a completely different way. And with the Children's Festival, which sadly no longer is in operation, but it was like you said, I didn't have any children, but I had 47,000 children. Um, um, and that to see their understanding of the world and people who live in the world increase 100-fold, that so many of them had never had any experience with, say, an African country or a South American country. And here they were experiencing and relating to them as human beings with something in common, with something they could share. And I think it must have made a huge difference in all those children, because one year we did have 52,000 children who came over the weekend for the festival.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It was just like the logistics were astonishing, but for me it was one of the great gifts that I was given, that I was able to experience so many different people and organizations and actors bringing their culture so powerfully to other children. I think we really impacted how they became world citizens in the future.
Oh, that's
And one of the most astonishing ones was, in fact, an Italian clown named Leo Bassi, who came from an Italian clown family. And one of his first acts was to juggle a piano with his feet, which I know. And he juggled it with his feet, which always broke all the ice in the room because from then on it didn't matter what happened, they were fascinated. But then he would go in. He did some things that were astonishing, that enabled kids to be better citizens. I mean, he was so if you can juggle a piano with your feet, you can do anything,
if you
and
can
it's
make it
worth.
there, you can make it anywhere.
That's true.
Oh wow. That yeah. I would have loved to see that. One of the other kids that was interviewed said what they liked about the theater was the community. You're creating a show with like-minded people where everyone has the same goal. Don't you love that? And don't you want more of that for kids today?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It was the watching them come in and then leave illuminated,
Mhm.
happier for having been there.
Mhm.
I mean, for anybody listening, if you have children, take them to some children's theater. Look for some really great children's theater because it runs the gamut. I mean, it can be wonderful cartoony episodes, but done well, that's just astonishingly wonderful.
Mhm.
But then as you get older, it's exploring things, but always with a touch of whimsy, always enable you to be absorbed in the story, to connect with the story, to identify with the people on the stage, and to have the people in your group become, I'm not going to say your family, but that together you are working for a common goal. All of this is absolutely necessary to become a better citizen.
Yeah. A related quote was one kid said what he liked best was working as a team, and we're going to make something beautiful that we get to show people. Isn't that
Oh,
precious that they work
it,
together to create this gift that then goes on out to the audience? I'm I'm so glad that these kids get that kind of teamwork experience. And it's really not available very much outside of sports. I guess band. Certainly you are constantly working
singing,
together.
it can be in
Yeah.
glee club and things like
Yeah.
that. But theater is in a class all by itself.
Yeah. And another kid said that theater is an accepting place where we can be ourselves, which I thought was so ironic because you're not going to, participate in a play to be yourself. You're going to be someone
Right.
else. And yet I remember what that feels like to walk into a rehearsal, to walk into reading or just working on sets. It was an accepting place. It was like, it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to step into a role, and that's what we're working on. We accept you as you come in, regardless of what you're wearing and what mood you're in. We're going to make something else out of that. And it's a paradox. It's a paradox of identity.
Yeah. If I had felt or known that, I wouldn't have been so terrified
Mm. Yeah.
because I came from this incredibly competitive, family
Mm.
where everything was competitive, and there could be winners and losers, and I didn't understand that in the theater there are no winners and losers. Everybody wins.
Yes, because you're working together, not against each other. It's interesting,
Right.
Marilyn, because I never uh, worked in debate in school. I would go to speech tournaments, but I would do the dramatic interp or duet
Hmm.
acting or be in plays. And I was scared of debate. I went on later to become a lawyer, whereas you did the other way and you've gone into the arts and the creativity and all that. That's so interesting. My son later went on to found a bilingual theater company in Egypt, and
Oh my,
they
what
did.
was that like?
It was it just happened that he moved there right at the beginning of the Arab Spring, and their productions in Cairo were, very relevant to all the upheavals that were going on. And um, he had his students. He had a daytime job with kids, and he had his students, um, some Saudi students and some Egyptians, um, do one assignment of interviewing their servants who they had never really talked to. They all had servants in the home. And the kids learned that their servants maybe hadn't seen their own families in several years and missed their families. And the kids' eyes were opened by doing these interviews, and then they acted out their servants' lives. And it was a great growth in empathy for these kids to take on these roles.
Wow.
Yeah,
I wonder if that's still continuing on any level. Wouldn't that be amazing?
yeah, he was daring, I would say. But you have to have kids that are willing to be daring too, along with you. And one thing I loved about theater was there were kids that didn't want to get on stage, like you. They didn't weren't interested in the acting, but there was, sound work. There's work on sets. There's costumes. There's dramaturgy. There's all kinds of stuff that young people can do to use their gifts too, besides just speaking in front of people. And
Mhm.
it's such a wide range of opportunities in live theater. Um, I really learned a lot from a part of our school theater where you probably are familiar with how a school will have so many kids that it'll go ahead and cast two different casts. So you get
Mhm.
more kids with the opportunity to perform. And I played I tried out for a kind of a seductive woman, and I was like a skinny little green bean with braces and glasses, and and everybody said, "Why is she trying out for this part?" And but I got it. I One reason I got it was I used this very kind of seductive Southern accent, and I got my hair done. I got my braces off just in time to do it, and I got a friend's little lap dog. Little, she was
Oh.
it was a real dog, and it just stayed in the crook of my arm all the time. It was a little powder puff, and I had this automatic prop then that suggested that I was, I don't know, kind of wealthy but kind of nurturing. And it was just a real different interpretation. The other girl that got the role was very naturally endowed and very gorgeous and wide-eyed and short, and I was real tall, and she played it completely differently. So we had these same lines and yet very different personalities. And it
Was the audience able to see both of you?
oh, a few of them did, and they thought it was weird. But it
No, that would be
both of them
fascinating.
worked. And my point is, one thing I learned was those words on the page that are the script that don't change take on very different lives through people's varying bodies and varying voices and costumes and interpretations, and then the words remain the same and go on unchanged. And years later, when I would look at deposition transcripts or trial transcripts and see the words, I had the sense of how many different things that transcript could mean, and how much it depended on who said those words and how they said them, and never to take for granted the transcript. And I think it made me a better lawyer to have seen different casts do the same play.
That's wonderful. That's fascinating. I mean, I was as you were saying that, I was thinking about because I wrote down everything that mom and I did in real time when she was living with dementia, and that there were so many really theatrical moments in that in that life. And there was this one, and it wasn't mother, but they were having a drum circle, and the people were sitting around drumming, and all of a sudden this wonderful woman raised her hand and said, let's start a band, we'll call it the Unmusical Band. And everybody laughed. And it was just, there were so many riffs, things you could just make that make the lives of people who are living with dementia live
Uh huh.
through different voices, live differently.
Uh huh.
um, but it's, it's, as I sit here, I'm thinking there's so much theater in everything. It would be really interesting to have that, those theatrical moments so that people could also have that same kind of empathy for people who are living with dementia
Yes.
or aging or any aspect of life.
Yes. Well, that segues beautifully into what I want to be our next episode, Marilyn. So would you come back and talk to us about your current work with dementia and the creative things you're finding out that can be done for people living with dementia?
Lovely.
Thank you.
Loved.
Thank you so much. We'll talk again. Bye-bye. Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LeahFarish.